This makes them commit and cherish you. Hey, I'm Antia with Magnetize Your Man. And today I'm really excited to have polarity coach Brody back based on popular demand. We had so many great comments. I'm like, you got to bring this man back. I need more wisdom. I call him like the truth of the voice of reason is what I always say when I see like his posts on Facebook. So excited to have you back, Zach, and talk a little bit more on this whole conversation, right? Because what happens is that what I see is that women either try to have a man commit, and you can also say what you see, right? But like have them commit either through like they're respecting themselves, but when they respect themselves, they come so much from the masculine energy, and it may not necessarily intentionally, right? But it's just like they don't know how else to respect themselves, meaning the women, without being in their masculine. And of course, that kind of like has the right men run the wrong direction. You know what I mean? Like, so what would you say? What have you seen that keeps sort of men from committing?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, I'm going to use this as a fantastic opportunity. So you actually gave me a directive earlier where you said, talk to me about, and of course you're interviewing me. So there's always going to be, you're steering the conversation, obviously, but here's how you can shift this. May I know more about this, right? Because now you're being permissive, but you're still actually asking for what your desires are. And this is going to flow perfectly into the question that you asked, because this is all about learning how to shift into your feminine energy, but still, it's not that you're getting a man's respect, it's that you're inspiring him to cherish you, right? And a lot of women, unfortunately, they learn that being a doormat doesn't work. They learn that, not communicating their needs and desires and just kind of staying silent, that doesn't work for a man, right? A man's never going to want to commit to that kind of woman. He's not going to want to cherish that kind of woman. He's not going to want to consider her needs. And so a lot of those women will end up thinking, okay, well, I need to just start setting boundaries. I need to just be more direct or directive about what I want in some kind of way, about what I need, stand up for my feelings, for my needs, all of that. And the problem is, that'll work probably relatively well for a really feminized, emasculated man, but it's not going to inspire a masculine man, and it's not going to bring out the masculine qualities in a man that a woman really wants to see, right? So she's not going to want to be in a relationship with any man that responds well to that, right? So the question for women is, how do I, and it's what you pose, right? How do I stay feminine and get what I need from a man, right? Without being a doormat, without being kind of like less than. And it comes down to two main things, right? Learning to communicate what you need, what you feel, what your problems are, right? Feminine communication, as I call it. So that includes being permissive. That includes asking for help with what you need. That includes sharing your feelings, all of that kind of stuff. Because a woman who's not in her self-worth, she's not going to be communicating that stuff. She's going to be staying silent. She's going to be downplaying what she needs and what she feels. She's going to be avoiding that kind of stuff because she doesn't want to burden a man. Right? She doesn't want to scare him away because she has too many needs or too many feelings, or she's too reactive or she's too sensitive, all that stuff, right? And of course, that's going to be the inner dialogue that many women have. So if you're not communicating that stuff, guaranteed a man's not going to be as masculine as he could and be inspired to want to cherish you. A man wants to cherish a woman, take care of a woman when she's in her self-worth, when he can feel her self-worth. But he's not going to feel that if you're not acting like you're worthy, right? If you're staying silent and you're not communicating what you need and what you feel. So you got to use feminine communication. And then two, the second big part of this is your willingness to flow away. Your willingness to leave any relationship, any situationship, anything
Reactionship.
Reactionship, anything where you're not getting what you need. Because a lot of women will settle, right? Especially, here's the thing, they might not settle for more feminized guys, right? They might be willing, if I can do better than this, and then they'll just leave. They won't tolerate much of a lack of consideration. But it's the really masculine men where it's like, oh, I really want this guy so bad, like I'm so attracted to him, I'm so connected to him, that's where, or that's when they become a lot less likely to be willing to flow away. And of course, then the man's going to feel that. What's he going to feel? A lack of feminine self-worth, even if she's communicating her needs and feelings and everything, right? You can communicate that stuff all day, even in a feminine way, but if you're not willing to walk away, it's not backed up by anything, so you lack self-worth, and a man's going to feel that, and he's not going to be interested in cherishing you.
Wow. And that, of course, that's really interesting, right? Because it's sort of like finding that middle ground. Because, when we talk about from an attachment standpoint, most women that come to me are coming more from sort of the fearful, avoidant realm, right? Where they either like totally ready to walk away, or like once they actually open up their heart, or once they communicate their needs, they have a really hard time walking away. And you actually talked about that, when a woman is really in her feminine embodied self, right? She is not a damsel in distress, nor is she an independent woman. So can you say a little bit more about that? What is that? Or can you bring an example of how am I getting there as a woman, right? If I'm like coming from a more masculine, due to childhood trauma, of course,
Yeah.
approach.
Yeah. So in this, so for a woman who's typically, where do you even start with this? This is such a big topic to unpack. A woman who is typically like, more classically masculine, we'll call it, right? Will often look at women who are more feminine and judge them as like a damsel in distress, right? And why is that? It's not necessarily because those women are damsels in distress. The problem is that they've got their own filters that where they're not accepting that part of themselves, the part of themselves that is interdependent and even dependent, right? There's nothing wrong with being dependent on a man for certain things, but interdependent overall, where the man is giving, his masculine energy, his leadership, his provision, his protection, and she, without even trying, is giving her submission, her radiance, her vulnerability, all of that stuff. And it's interdependent because they're both getting so much out of it, right? It's a healthy relationship. And so for a lot of those classically masculinized women, one thing that they need to do is they need to learn how to let go of control, start using feminine communication, start asking for help. That's a big one, is asking for help. And they're going to have a lot of self-judgments around that. Not just self-judgments, but a lot of fear that if they do that, right, this goes back to what I said earlier, that a man is going to not be interested in her. Why is that? I mean, typically, if we're going back to childhood patterns, and it doesn't have to be this way, but this is typical, a woman, when she was a little girl, wasn't getting all of her needs met. Her feelings weren't, her parents weren't holding space for all of her feelings. Their feelings weren't welcome. She wasn't allowed to just communicate whatever she needed, and where she'd receive that kind of safety and security, knowing that, oh yeah, I'll be taken care of, right? So she had to step into that more masculine role, either to survive or to get some of her needs met, right? Or to avoid some form of abuse or criticism, all of that kind of stuff. Just a childhood pattern. Kids learn to survive the best way that they can and get their needs met the best way that they can. So a lot of women go really on the independent route, because what are they learning? This is how to get love, and this is how to avoid not getting love, is by taking care of myself, being independent, all that stuff. And yeah, that was probably true in childhood with your parents to one extent or another, because they weren't perfect. They had their own woundings. The problem is that when you recreate that in your love life, you're going to attract kind of the same kind of crap that you had in your childhood, or more than likely worse, where you're not getting your needs met and you don't have a man who loves the idea of taking care of you. And before I finish up here, and I'll let you continue, Antia, this is just something for women to think about. Just imagine this: a masculine man who's really strong, powerful, and you can feel his amazing energy, and he's protective. You feel so safe, so good with him, and he just wants to take care of you. That's what gives him joy, is him taking care of you. That's what a healthy masculine man wants to do. He wants to take care of you financially. He wants to take care of you emotionally. wants to take care of you sexually, wants to take care of you physically. That's what brings him joy. You just need to learn how to inspire that from him, because he's not going to want to do that for any woman. He's going to want to do that for a certain kind of woman who brings that out in him.
And what would be like an example of that, right? Because you're like dangling the carrot in front of our nose here, Zach. You know what I mean? Because again, you know, the women can sometimes feel like lost and just trying to follow all this different advice from the YouTubers, right? And just like, okay, I leaned back and I didn't text back right away and I didn't do all these things, right? So is that the direction that we're headed when it comes to inspiring a man? Or like what could be like an example to think more of in terms of becoming this true feminine embodied woman that you talk about sometimes in your videos?
So first of all, you know, I have a lot of compassion for women, right? Because for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is that there is so much BS when it comes to dating advice that it really screws women up, and it gets them actually more disconnected from themselves, more disconnected from their femininity, more this game playing or masculine frame, or yuck. And the thing is, the vast majority of advice that's out there, the vast majority of influencers, authors, whatever, they're teaching women how to be successful with men, and it does work. But guess what? They're teaching women how to be successful with a certain type of man. Guess what type of man? An emasculated man.
Emasculated.
Right? Not a masculine man, not a dominant man, not the kind of man who wants to take care of you. And that's why you keep ending up, or one of the reasons why you keep ending up with much less than what you want. So in answer to your question, right, what does that look like? Well, first of all, it looks like always using feminine communication. You know, always communicating all your needs, all your feelings, just like we talked about. And because the number one thing the women have to understand, the number one thing that a masculine man wants is a woman who respects him, who knows how to respect him. And what women think respect means typically is not what men not just believe conceptually, but more importantly, instinctually feel as respect. So, you know, great example is with leading, right? When a woman gives a man any kind of directive or a boundary, right? Or even something soft like, hey, I'd really love it if you did this for me, something like that. It's a form of disrespect. Now, not intentionally, right? It's going to be very rare that a woman is intentionally trying to disrespect a man. It's just that women haven't been given a language. They haven't been given a feminine voice. And so they don't know how to communicate properly in a way that's not just respectful to the man, but is also honoring themselves at the exact same time, right? And of course, that's my main focus, is helping women do that. And the reason that I got into it is because, you know, once I got really deep into my marriage, I realized, man, I don't want to cherish my wife at all. Like I don't want to take care of her. I really got to that point. And this was a woman that I really deeply loved, but I didn't feel that at all, even when I got to the point where I really wanted to. And it was because she wasn't communicating to me with respect. She wasn't communicating to me with feminine communication and feminine energy. And so it's the number one thing that you can do is learn how to communicate properly. All this gameplay nonsense. Now, there's a little bit of nuance to this, what I'm going to say, a little bit of context, but in general, you know, if you're, let's say you went on a couple dates with a man, let's say you went on 3 dates and you really liked him, and then he kind of goes cold, just as an example, and you're like, I really liked him. Now, well, I'm starting to feel anxious.
Yep.
Oh God, now what? Right? What do you do now? So the conventional, I guess what's now called conventional advice is, okay, I'm just going to ignore him and play hard to get. And I probably should have been playing hard to get from the beginning. And what's going to happen? I mean, he might reach out, reach back again. But are you going to do that your entire dating and relationship life, right? Are you going to have to play those kind of games where you just go into avoidance and backing off? What are you doing when you're doing that? You're actually dishonoring your heart. You're actually not communicating what you actually need, what you actually feel. And it's because you believe that if you actually shared that with him, You actually shared, oh my God, God forbid that you feel anxious with a guy that you really like, that he's going to think that you're gross, that, oh, she's needy, too needy and, sensitive and everything. That's not true. Sure, it's true with some guys, the kind of guys that you don't want, but a really masculine man, if you can just communicate that respectfully, then guess what? What is he going to want to do? He's going to want to give you some reassurance. He's going to want to tell you, hey, no, it's cool. I've just been really busy with work. I'm going to call you tomorrow or whatever, right? Now that is nuanced, and to be fair, like I will say, it is good to have a life so that you have other things to do other than waiting for a man to call you, right? But it's not about, oh, I'm just going to pretend that I'm busy and not message him, not do anything. It's get your life, like have fun in your life, focus on other things. And then of course, if you feel feelings while dating a man, just be honest about them. You want a man who loves your feelings, wants to take care of your feelings. So be honest about them right from the very beginning. And any man who doesn't care, well, why would you want him anyway?
That's such a good point. And that's also like letting go, of like any future visions or responses that women, well, men can have too, but we talk about women on this particular case, right? Where we project, what we think the other person is going to respond to, based on our, unconscious expectation, right? Because however we were treated in childhood or in our past relationships, so we're like, oh, if I say something, then he's going to say, forget about it, it's too complicated, you want too much, right? It's like, but have you tried, you know what I mean? And have you tried a different approach? Instead of actually saying, I have like a client right now, and she's like, well, I've been like walking on eggshells. I've been just basically saying nothing, because every time when I say something, up until a month ago, he's just like, I don't talk about it. And you know what I mean? It's too complicated. I don't want to get into this. And so the woman just stops like communicating. Now we also don't know if we're dealing with an emasculated man on top of that, if we're talking with a healthy masculine man, you know what I mean? 100%.
Yeah, the eggshell thing is big, right? And there's going to be a lot of women listening to this that are walking on eggshells to one extent or another, right? Because think of it this way. Whenever you are walking on eggshells, like you're not 100% comfortable just sharing, what does that mean? It means you're actually in your masculine energy to one extent or another. And of course, part of that is going to be because the man's not providing that safety, that place of safety because of his own triggers and reactivity, and if you might withdraw or attack if you don't communicate right. But then a lot of it is your own stuff as well, and you got to make a decision as a woman that no matter what a man's reactions are, you're not going to walk on eggshells, right? You are going to fully honor yourself 100% of the time, no matter how he shows up, no matter how he reacts, because you deserve the freedom to do so. Now, there's a caveat to this, right? And it's, you can't just have that mindset of, I'm just going to say whatever the hell I want and I'm never going to tiptoe around anything. Because if you do that, you're going to end up actually communicating disrespectfully a lot of the time, often, or maybe sometimes unknowingly, or often unknowingly. You need to also know feminine communication. You need to use feminine communication. And that's your filter system. Because once you actually know how to be respectful to a man and also operate from your self-worth, your feminine self-worth as a woman, now you can just decide, all right, I'm just going to always share no matter what. And if that filters some men out because they get all reactive and turn into little children or whatever, great. Because I'm looking for my masculine man who wants to take care of my heart. You got to put your heart first.
Yeah. And I also feel like, like a healthy masculine man, you call it, is also willing to step through the ring of fire, right? Like I feel like an emasculated man or feminine man stops when it gets hot, just like, oh, conflict could arise, or, I need to, face my own fear of, getting trapped in a relationship or lose my independence or all those things, right? Well, for like a healthy masculine man, it's like, oh, I already stepped through that ring of fire, right? Just like one more time, you know what I mean? And or maybe not, like maybe it's not even a big deal for him. I mean, for my husband, he was just like breathing. It's like, okay, So now I have a girlfriend. Now I've got that piece taken care of, and you know what I
Yeah.
mean? But I'm also on purpose, and I also do all my other things. And so there's not even like this big resistance that's coming up, right? It's like sort of this huge transformational, activation inside of the man's nervous system, so to say.
Yeah, so we live in a very messed up world today, right? Where both men and women have, and it's both men and women, right? To very like pretty much equal degrees, have become very wounded, very jaded, very brainwashed, indoctrinated into a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
untrue beliefs about dating, about the opposite sex, all of that kind of stuff. And there's definitely going to be men that do fear commitment. That's going to be more so with marriage rather than just commitment into a relationship. That's the really big thing, because that's for life, right? Or it's supposed to be. It doesn't actually end up that way, but theoretically it's for life. That's what the commitment is. For relationships, yes, like getting into an exclusive relationship, yes, there are going to be some men that do have that kind of fear. Typically it's going to be ones that are much more emasculated and feminized. But what women are going to be, here's the thing, women are going to often make assumptions about the reasons that men are not interested in a relationship that are usually not true. And one of those assumptions is going to be, oh, he's just not ready for a relationship, or he's just been too hurt, or he's scared of commitment, or, he's emotionally unavailable, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, this might land hard for some women, but guess what? That's really not typically the case. It's that he's just emotionally unavailable for you. Okay. He's just closed off for you. He's scared of getting into a relationship with you. Why? Because what he foresees, what he can see in the future is being trapped. And actually, I'm just going to segue onto this. So this whole idea about being trapped, because freedom is a really big thing for a man.
Yeah.
A man wants to feel free. Okay, what does that mean? Does that mean free to have sex with any woman that he wants? No, not a masculine man anyway. A really emasculated man, yes. But a man needs to feel the freedom of his choices being his decision. So for example, in my relationship, I'm married to my wife. I have a lot of responsibility, and we have a child, but I feel totally free. What does that mean? It means that I don't feel controlled by my wife in any way. I don't feel controlled by her expectations or standards of me, or her feelings, like being worried that I'm going to be hurting her feelings in some kind of way. Why? It's because I learned how to lead her out of her masculine energy, where she was creating expectations and standards, and kind of weaponizing her feelings by getting angry at me and kind of energetically coercing me into doing something that I didn't really want to do, and into communicating vulnerably. Because guess what? When a woman learns how to communicate, she's like, she's being permissively asking for what she needs. And yeah, I know that can be triggering for a lot of women, or like sharing her feelings vulnerably, right? And she's not energetically putting that on the man in any kind of way. Guess what? Now he's free to decide what to do with that. Do I take care of my woman's feelings? Do I grant her permission for this thing? It's energetically his choice, so he's free. But because assuming that the man's heart is online and he cares about you, because you're also in your feminine self-worth and he can feel your worth, it's like the only thing he would want to do is take care of you, is cherish you, right? That's the difference. So it's like freedom because you're feminine. If you are masculine, a man will never ever feel free with you, and he won't, unless he's really emasculated, he won't want to be in a relationship with you.
Oh, that's like so mind-blowing, because I'm sure there's women watching this right now. They're like, wait, I always thought it was because he wanted to play the field and he just doesn't want to commit, and he just wants to, plant his seeds, so to say, in as many places as he can. But to actually be, it's like, it's not about that, right? It's actually about like, yeah, if you can actually sort of call forth, his masculine from your feminine. And it's more almost like what you said, an energy. It's like a way of being, as opposed to here's what you need to say, or here's your 3 lines, or you know what I mean? You actually sort of inspire him, and it's a huge conversation. I mean, for those who've been following me for a while, like, I mean, at our wedding, I said, with this ring, I set you free, right? Because I knew my husband's biggest fear was to be trapped, because he had his own childhood, and you know what I mean? Moms had best of intentions, but let's just say it wasn't like exactly encouraging the masculine side of my husband to come out. But the last piece that I want to really talk about is what I found on my dating journey, and what I actually see sort of subtly with women, right? Is part of why they also can be really drawn to sort of more feminized or masculized, emasculated men, is because, they say, well, healthy masculine men are angry, right? And so then they can abuse me, right? So I'm going to go with the safe one, especially if I had a childhood where my dad was a raging alcoholic, right? Or I was beaten every day, or whatever it is, right? So can we talk about more about that? Because that's what happened in my dating journey too, that I was actually very like, when I started to feel sort of like the anger potential or the aggression potential of a man, I was like, no, this is like, no. I'm just gotta steer back to my spiritual guys, I call them, you know what I mean? To spiritual ones
Yeah.
that are like to meditate and not be in their bodies, you know what I mean? That feels like way safer, you know what I mean?
Yes,
Um,
which is ironic because they actually end up, if you actually were to commit to them in marriage, they'll end up being the least safe because they're not able to protect you. They're not able to truly provide for you,
mm,
take care of you. But,
mm,
the feeling in your body is, yeah, I'm not going to get attacked because, what a woman's actually feeling is his instincts are offline. And this is important. One of my recent videos, I said that all masculine men are angry men. Okay, what does that mean? That doesn't mean that they're all like reactive and you say anything and they'll get super pissed off at you. But a man's instincts, right, his masculine instincts will make him cause him to experience irritation and anger when things are not going his way, which means he's being disrespected, or if there's a threat in some kind of way. And so he'll be reactive. Men whose masculine instincts are offline, they're not going to feel that. So you could disrespect them. You could just tell him what to do or set boundaries or whatever, and he's like, okay, whatever. It's not a big deal. That's actually a sign of a man who's deeply emasculated. Now, a really masculine man, a masculine man who does not have mastery of his feelings will get potentially aggressive, angry, irritated when a woman is disrespectful to him. That's actually a good sign. That actually means that his instincts are online, that he's got a spine, because otherwise you're just going to be able to walk all over him. Of course, a woman is going to feel unsafe. We'll use the word unsafe. It's not a feeling, but that perception of being unsafe with that kind of man, because you don't want to be attacked in a relationship. You don't want to be constantly criticized, put down, all of that stuff. Most women watching this have experienced that at least once from a man, and it's really an unpleasant situation, an unpleasant relationship. So the masculine man, his instincts are online, so he feels that anger, he feels that irritation, but he's emotionally centered. So when he gets disrespected, when his woman leads or judges, resists him, whatever, he'll feel the irritation. He's able to stay fully emotionally centered and be like, hey, sweetheart, you're judging me right now. Don't do that. Just tell me what you're feeling, right? Or at least if they're trained in the academy, they'll have, in my coaching program, they'll have that level of leadership to do that and lead her, not just out of what she's doing, not just call her out, but into the healthy behavior, the feminine behavior. The other thing so yes, 100% right that women will find these guys to feel more safe in a relationship because they've been abused, taken advantage of, whatever. The other really big reason why women do this is because they lack feminine self-worth, and any worth that they do have comes from what they can do for the man, right? So you can think of the typical guy who's just doesn't have his life together, he's broke, or his life is not amazing, right? So she comes in, she's able to maybe pay for some dates or give him a bunch of advice, health advice, whatever, and then it's like, oh, I'm worthy, right? I'm good enough in this relationship. And of course, what's happening? It's totally depolarized. She's energetically leading. She's in her masculine. He's more in the receptive feminine. And it's all because the woman, well, actually both of them, lack that self-worth, but it feels safe for her. Because the flip side with a really masculine man who's just cherishing her, taking care of her, paying for everything, giving her advice, being there to protect her, going out of his way. For a woman who has a lot of self-worth issues, maybe on some level she's like, oh yeah, that'd be amazing. But in practice, when she experiences it, it's like, oh my God, I feel so much shame and unworthiness and anxiety that he's going to leave me, because what's my value in the relationship? And so she's actually going to end up pushing that kind of man away, that kind of love and provision away, because she can't handle it, because she doesn't believe that she's worthy of it. She doesn't know how to use feminine communication to communicate what's going on for her so that the man can understand and actually help her feel more secure and start shifting those patterns.
100%. And what I've seen in my own research and work with women is that, because the women, those particular types of women, not all women, they don't feel safe to receive, right? And part of it is actually because that part of their nervous system, the receptors, they're asleep, they're frozen. So it really causes panic, because it sort of feels like free fall, because the nervous system doesn't know how to organize. Like, I don't know what to do with that. Like, I only know how to give. I only know self to other all day long, right? Maybe self to self if I know how to cut myself off, but I don't know how to be. You know what I mean? Like, I just stop breathing. You know what I mean? I get red like a tomato, and you know what I mean? Deflect compliments and things like that, right? And so, and that's the piece too, where the woman is not willing to go through that phase of what I call free fall of the nervous system, where you don't know, you know what I mean? You just receive and you don't know who you are in that moment, because in that moment, this particular woman that you talk about doesn't know who she is when she's receiving, you know what I mean? She doesn't know how to be with that, right? Like,
when that's been your pattern your whole life, like that is your survival pattern, it's all you know. It's literally all you know. So to let that go, it's like, walking off a cliff. It's like you've never done this before, and it can feel like death, because it's literally going against all the survival strategies that you've done your entire life, where you don't know anything different. So of course, you're gonna unless you'll watch this video, you get coaching from you get coaching from me, you get coaching from somebody who can help you shift those patterns. You're going to just continue to do the same thing over and over and over again, and guess what? You're going to get the exact same result.
100%, right? Like, totally. And one thing that I found, just because, I mean, my mom is a narcissist, so therefore I attract a lot of women into my life who were sort of like in marriages with sociopath, narcissists, sort of like that kind of very distorted personality. And there has been a lot of abuse with the anger and all of that. So you're talking a little bit about sort of like some distinctions on, hey, so when I date, how do I know this guy's actually healthy masculine? Because he's also leading, he's also trusting himself, he's also taking charge, but he's not using it for abuse. He's not a sociopath, or he's not a narcissist, or he's not a psychopath, or usually more like sociopath is narcissist is what my women.
It's really important to know the difference, because as I'm sure you know, the word narcissist is probably the most overused word in the English language, but mostly by women, but sometimes by men as well. And there's much first of all, if all you're attracting is narcissists, that's something very clearly wrong with you, or people that you think are narcissists. There's a reason that there's a reason you're attracting that, and there's a way to shift that. But then the other thing is, are you actually attracting that, right? It's not something that's, I don't know, 3%, 4%.
Yeah, it's small. Yeah.
Right? It's not a big percentage.
All
the rest, a lot of, here's the interesting thing. The ways that a not like truly dominant, healthy masculine man, but we'll say like kind of sort of masculine man, he's just not fully embodied. The way that he's going to show up can seem somewhat narcissistic. And it's funny, in my marriage, like before I started turning this around, one of the turning points was I was like just so irritated by the way that my wife was communicating with me. And I had just sat down by myself to try to deal with my irritation. I was just so angry and just wanted to be away from her, didn't want to meet her needs. And I was trying to just emotionally center myself, do some meditation. And I thought, like, wait, am I a narcissist? Like, why do I have such a resistance to want to take care of my wife's needs? Like, why do I just really hate it when I care about her? And it turns out, no, I'm not a narcissist, and a narcissist is unlikely to have those thoughts to begin with, questioning whether they're a narcissist. But of course, I did have certain traits of narcissism, as a lot of masculine men do, and that's going to present when a woman, like, it's going to look like narcissism in many ways when a woman is not communicating respectfully, right? So what does that mean? If a woman is leading in any kind of way, or like, let's say she's upset because her needs aren't being met, and she's like, oh, like, you do this, and maybe she's saying it in a relatively calm way. She's just trying to communicate what's going on, and she thinks that she's communicating respectfully. Maybe she thinks she's communicating vulnerably. She's not. She's just judging, blaming. And so the man is going to resist that. A man with his masculine instinct online in any way is going to resist that. And he's going to look to the woman, from the woman's perception, extremely selfish and self-interested, and like not interested in her needs in any kind of way. That's how I look to my wife. And she called me a narcissist at one point. I think maybe. I think maybe a few times, right? And when I started polarizing the relationship and leading her out of her disrespectful behavior, it actually came out a few more times where she called me that. But what I was trying to lead her to do is like, no, I actually do care about your feelings, but the only way to actually, for me to feel that care and feel inspired to want to do something about it, inspired to change my own behaviors, is when I am feeling that respect from you, right? No judging, no leading, no blaming, no resisting, none of that masculine energy. And so that's how a woman's going to figure out what kind of man she's dealing with. Because if she's using masculine energy, any kind of non-feminine communication with a man who's, let's say, relatively masculine, or sometimes who's really deeply emasculated too, it depends how it presents, he's going to show up in a way that might appear narcissistic. And then what's going to happen? She's going to not take responsibility for what she's doing, because she doesn't know any better, and be like, oh, he's just a narcissist. I got another one. I'm going to add it to the other 27 narcissists that I've dated the last few years. There are 27 narcissists in a row. What's going on? Every man's a narcissist. No, you don't know how to communicate respectfully is the most likely thing. And the second is so here's the thing. You learn to communicate respectfully, and then you see how the man shows up. Either he shows up very differently and starts considering you. And this is, with our students in our academy program, we've seen like day and night shifts sometimes. It depends on the person. When they shift this, it's like, oh my God, my man's treating me totally differently. I've never experienced anything like this before, right? Day and night, just by changing the way that they're communicating. Of course, it's not going to happen every time. Why? Because some men have really deep wounding, and some men legitimately are narcissists or sociopaths, or just incapable of caring for a woman's feelings. But now it's like, okay, I've done everything that I can. I've been showing up clean on my side of the street. My man is still yelling at me, criticizing me, telling me I shouldn't have these feelings, telling me that it's all my fault, taking responsibility for nothing. Guess what? You got one choice left at that point, and it's to flow away. It's the only thing that you can do. He's exposed himself, and he's exposed himself because you've done your work as a woman with feminine communication. That's the only way that you're going to know for sure. Well, that's not true. If a man's like really blatantly narcissistic, you might know regardless, because he's just so vindictive and awful. But for the most part, this is, yes, it's like you can see it from a mile away. But for most men, you're not going to know until you really clean up your side of the street.
Totally. And yeah, I definitely want to make that distinction, because I did have women who ended up in court cases of a narcissist where even the mediator was saying, the case is closed, divorce is final, like the guy, there's something off of this guy, you know what I mean? So when there's like somebody who's like, you know what I mean, a neutral assessment, right? And it's like feeling like, you know what I mean, we don't need to go deeper into this. There's like toxic, behavior here that doesn't make any sense. That's not consistent. Going
real
on. So we're not
narcissism
talking
is
about
terrifying,
that, right?
Especially for a woman. Like it's terrible for a man as well. It's terrible for anybody, but and especially if you don't know and you think that it's your fault, and you just keep trying to fix yourself, like what a nightmare you're in. And of course, it's the last thing that I would want for any woman. There's definitely legitimate narcissists out there.
Yes.
I want every woman to know the difference, because
Yes.
you can completely destroy your life if you stick around with a man like that. They're awful. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just want to say that for the record, because there's always like this one woman who's like, no, that's not what we said. You know, we did make a distinction. We're not saying for you to stay in a super toxic, abusive relationship and like make yourself even more vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
Like that's not what we're saying.
Right.
Um,
Yeah,
but
and
yeah,
I'm going to just add one other point, because this is a really big, like you're bringing up a really important safety issue, so it should be fully fleshed
100%.
out, right?
Yeah.
This is an
Yeah.
issue that we see with our clients, where it's like, yeah, they start learning feminine communication, but then they start thinking like, okay, if I just shift everything, he will definitely shift. So if he's not shifting, it's definitely because of me. No, like 90% of the time, yes, that is true. 10%, I don't know the exact percentage, but let's say 10% of the time, no. And you need to figure out the difference, because you can waste years and just experience so much more trauma and abuse, and then abusing yourself, thinking, oh my God, it's me, I'm just garbage, like, blah, blah, blah. And you believe all of his stuff. You need to get this figured out, because yes, some of the time it's just him and it has nothing to do with you. And the only thing to do is leave.
Yeah. Thank you for just reiterating that, right? Because sometimes once we hear something that triggered us in an interview, then we just kind of filter it through and we kind of delete the rest. So we just want to reiterate that again, so that you're not saying, Zach Brody, so Antia Boyd is like, no, but not saying that at all. You know what I mean? I'm like highly protective of my women, and we're definitely making really strong distinctions there. Well, Zach, I could talk to you forever. I mean, so many topics to talk about, so many subtleties when it comes to, masculated men and how to attract the right man, and what are the subtle motivations why more masculine woman ends up being attracted to one man or the other. But for the women who are like, just really, you mentioned the academy or some other thing, like what's going on, and how can I learn more about, potentially get involved with your work or just get involved with your community? Like, where can they find you?
So first of all, the place to go is relationshipofyourdreams.com. That's my website, relationshipofyourdreams.com. On that website, you'll find pretty much all of my links. So to my YouTube channel, first of all, you have a lot of great free content. I'm very active on there. We have a masterclass that happens every so often, where we will role play. We'll demonstrate with role plays and teach you what this feminine communication looks like to solve these kind of problems. So it'll be really, really extremely useful for you. 2 hours, blow your mind. You'll never go back. My books are on there as well. So I got 4 books. I'm going to be writing more as well, to really help you understand what this polarized dynamic looks like, how to start applying feminine communication, how to start shifting whatever you're experiencing in a much better way. And then of course our academy program info is on there, where we work with clients in our group program very intensively to help you shift this. Also follow me on Facebook. I don't think the link is on my website, but there's lots of fun stuff that happens on Facebook as well. Oh,
Lots of
you
fun.
find me. Here's how you'll find me on my website, relationshipyourdreams.com. There is actually a link to my free group, which has like 18,000 people on Facebook. So just by joining that, lots of great conversations that happen, and you'll find me in there too if you're not following me already.
So good, Zach. Yeah, I can only imagine. I just see things just on your wall, and that's already like, threads of conversations and discourses, and you know what I mean, like polarizing, opinions, which is great, right? I always say, like, when there's a trigger, there's a treasure. And so to see, oh wow, there's something that charged you. That's a good thing. That means there's
Yep.
something in life inside of you around that. Let's talk about it. What's happening, girlfriend? You know what I mean? Versus sort of walking on eggshells, right? So, well, awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming back, Zach. And ladies, yeah, leave comments, questions below, and we're always happy to hear your feedback. Because this is like an open discussion, and this is something that brings up a lot, and I know it brings up a lot because it's not something you're used to, and it takes something to transform without making yourself wrong, without beating yourself up, blaming yourself. It's none of that. But just simply like start, stepping into an empowered way of being, which doesn't mean masculine, by the way, which is also another topic. We could talk about sex, you know, you just keep going. But how to be empowered and in your feminine embodied self. Any final words you want to leave us with, Zach, before we conclude for today?
Just want to say thank you for having me on. It was really wonderful talking to you, and it's always a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, awesome. All right, ladies. Well, we'll talk to you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.